It is 1:38 or 37 this afternoon, January 23rd, 2015. The Committee on Higher Education, Cultural Affairs, Public Libraries, and Women's Affairs is conducting this public hearing today at the Guam Legislative Building on the following bill. Bill number 19-33 COR, introduced by T.R. Muña Barnes, an act to amend Section 852C of Chapter 8, Article 2 of Title 1, Guam Code Annotated, relative to arts in buildings and facilities. A 5-day notice was sent out on Thursday, January 15th, 2015, and additional notices of the hearing was also sent out on January 20th and the 21st. Testimonies, of course, can be addressed to my office, and you can either hand deliver it to the office here at 155 Hessler Street. You can also drop it off at our mailbox, which is at the reproduction room of the main legislative building. You can also email it to fbtorres@judy1pat.com, or you can fax it to 472-3589. I'd like to thank my colleagues who have joined me this morning. Senator Tina Rose Muña Barnes, Senator Anthony Ada, and Senator Frank Blas Jr. And I'm sorry, Jim Espo. Oh, that's right, Jim Espo done. Hey. I won't say anything, but Frank was with us earlier this morning. So you're right, he was here earlier with us when we were addressing some of our student leaders. To testify on bill number 19-33, and I'm going to ask you to come forward, take a seat, Joseph Cameron and Monica Guzman. And while you're working your way up here, I'm going to ask the author, of course, to briefly explain what Bill 19 is all about.
Masi, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, for giving me the opportunity to briefly speak on Bill 19-33 COR, which is literally just to amend Chapter 8, Article 2, Section 852C of the GCA, because it's relative to the arts in the buildings and facilities. Madam Speaker, this bill's intent is to temporarily take the funding source that has been placed in statute for the arts and to place the fund again to CAHA for the FESPAC festival, which will happen here in 2016. And as this body knows, that Guam will be hosting the Festival of Pacific Arts, which we call FESPAC, is a region-wide festival celebrating the various arts and cultures of the Pacific. And we also know, Madam Speaker, that because Guam will be hosting this event, they will be able to highlight traditional performance, arts, cultures, displays, demonstrations, inclusive of cultural storytelling, and other activities, including music and all that, from I want to say 27 countries, with over 2,500 participants coming from the different islands. But more importantly, Guam will have an opportunity to see over 10,000 tourists in that month who usually follow the Festival of the Arts. And Guam did do this bid several years ago, and we won the bid to host these games and to host this show like the South Pacific Games. I just want to share with you that as we did shine in 1999, and I know that the chairman of CAHA knows that perspective and the director of CAHA, because they too were a part of when we had to showcase Guam to the rest of the Pacific region through through the event of sports. This time it's through the event of arts and cultural display, a cultural heritage, cultural perspective from the different countries. Again, Kaha has a seat at the table. They're the ones that are going to facilitate for the government and the island of Guam. And this is just taking temporarily a funding source that has been put into statute already to give it for this specific purpose. I know that there may be some concerns from the artisans that would say that this is taking away of something that has finally just been put into play, and it had the rules and regs to follow what the true mission mandate was that was put into statute. But as you know, Madam Speaker, I'm open to any amendments if necessary, but this is something that we have to do as a government, as one Team Guam, is to be able to showcase us, and we truly need the resources and the money to make this event, this presentation, successful. Guam, every stakeholder from Guam has to come in together to make sure that this is a success. So that's from the administration, from the legislature, from all the community at large, inclusive of our mayors and vice mayors. So this is a start and a commitment. Wearing another hat, Madam Speaker, as finance chair, and you being a part of that committee, having to find out that we as an island have to come up with $13 million to host this Festival of the Arts, and we're going to need a lot of money. Right now, the Festival of the Arts FESPAC trust account has a little over $2.7 million in that account, and the proposed rate is at 13 million plus, and the event is less than a year and a half away. It's in May of 2016, so, and we're already headed into February, so we have our work cut out for us, Madam Speaker, and this is why the introduction of this bill was necessary. But again, as in everything, if there are any recommendations from the administration and the organizers, I'm open to it. Sinamasi.
You're welcome, Senator. So on the testimony, I ask that you speak into the microphone, make sure that the button is on, the red light is on. State then your name and the agency you represent, and if you are here in favor or you don't support the bill. And we'll go ahead and begin then with Mr. Cameron, who is the director, president of CAHA. Or chairman. What? You have so many titles, I don't know which one I'm going to use. President, Department of Chamorro Affairs.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker, and favorably, of course, to all my other colleagues up there. My brother Jim, I almost dropped your nameplate down there and almost changed your name to something else, but it's all
Frank Ross Jr.
I know you guys are in the same office space. That's good. That's good. He's my nephew. The Department of Chamorro Affairs, as the umbrella entity for CAHA, supports the endeavors of this particular proposed legislation. We are very cognizant of the fact that we do have some in-kind, we do have some monies that are being already collected through sponsorship, and I'll leave the council chair of CAHA to speak on that behalf. We believe and we liken this whole situation to the very last paragraph. Is the meat of the input. And thank you, Senator Tina Rose Muña Barnes, for making such great time put aside for Monica and I to sit down with you and look at the logistics of how this would happen without impacting in any way, shape, or form the intent of the legislation on the percent for the art. We're very confident that if we create an amendment that proposes this legislation, that the delegates the authorization to use the percent for the arts funds to be made available to FESPAC until June 2016, subject to the Council's review and approval of any of FESPAC's grant application to CAHA. because that process is already in place. But we want to put in language FESPAC so that it's clear that this is really money that impacts directly our artisans. It's not anything else but all about the artisans. And our local government, as you so stated, Senator Barnes, we're all on the same plate on this. And any amount of monies that can be realized between now and June 1st is always welcomed. So yes, I yield to the other senators to please endorse and pass this particular bill.
Okay. I wanted to hear first all testimonies, then I'll open it up. Okay. Monica Guzman, then, who's the chairperson of the Guam Council on the Arts and Humanities.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Barnes, Senator Ada, Senator Espaldon. I want to thank you on behalf of my fellow board members of the Guam Council of Arts and Humanities Agency. I would like to speak a little bit on what the board of directors did relative to this bill. And last week there was a working session held by the council, and we did recognize the intent of the bill, and CAHA as being the lead agency for the festival, we put our FESPAC hat on and we're 100% in support of the bill. We put our CAHA hat on and we're 100% trying to protect the percent of the arts funding. As you know, the percent of the arts funding was introduced many years ago by the late Senator Bel Arreola. And it was her intent at the time to create public art in public places. And through that bill, many years ago, we were able to do many art pieces that are in different government buildings, the airport, the Judicial Center. And then it went stagnant for about 15 to 20 years. And with the revision of the law by Senator Aline Yamashita back in 2011, I believe, CAHA, the agency, has in the last 4 years, we've revived the percent of the arts program. We through the AAA process, came up with rules and regulations. And in the last 2 or 3 years, we went through the process. We've had like 2 different projects under the Percent of the Arts program. And we're now at a point in time where we feel that the rules and regulations that we developed back in 2011 need to be revised, because now we've gone through the program. And so we're at that point right now where CAHA is going to, through the AAA process again, revise the rules and regulations. And we're asking that perhaps through the revision of the rules and regulations, that we'll be able to support the Festival of Pacific Arts in some type of funding. And as Joseph said earlier, through the grant process. The law currently says that if a developer does not wish to have public art in that building, then that the funds can go into a grant, an account in CAHA specifically for grants. But what we did when we did the rules and regulations is we capped the grants at $3,000, and we found out in the last few years that that's way too low. So one of the things that we want to do in revising the rules and regulations is remove that cap. And through that vehicle, that may be a way that we can support the Festival of Pacific Arts. And so that's what we're hoping that we can do and through an amendment to this bill, is allow CAHA to revise our rules and regulations to remove the cap on our grants, and then through that grant process, then we'll be able to provide funding to the festival. In our written testimony, there was like 7 or 8 items that the council had concerns about. And it's all really geared at protecting the percent of the arts program for our artists. Like I said earlier, it's been in limbo for the last 20 years, and just now our artists are getting excited that the program is being revived and there's potential for them to create works of art that will be in public places. The Guam Museum, the Guam Chamorro Educational Facility is one program that we had probably about 20 artists that are participating in the Percent of the Arts program there. The CCU building, there was probably about 30 artists that provided art pieces that will adorn the Gloria B. Nelson facility. There are other potential buildings that the Percent of the Arts program will allow our artists. And so we really need, as a council, to protect that program. And that's all we're asking, that allow us through our rules and regulations to do that. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much. I'm going to, yield them to the author to ask any questions or get clarification. Senator?
Madam Speaker, Madam Chair. Just for the sake of the listening audience, I'd like to ask you guys, what are the actual dates of the Festival of the Arts events that will happen here in 2016?
The festival will begin on May 22, 2016, and will end on June 4th, 2016. And it's a 2-week affair. And we're just now, through the executive branch, have mobilized the logistics committee. And so I think we're going to start to see a lot more action on from the executive side as far as mobilizing venues and logistic concerns.
Okay. The Festival of the Arts, through executive order or through statute, has that the Department of Chamorro Affairs with CAHA, it will be the event facilitators. Am I right?
CAHA is the lead agency for the festival. Yes, CAHA are the sitting members on the Council of Pacific Arts and Culture. And the council actually has ownership of the festival, which travels among members of the Council of Pacific Arts and Culture. Right now, I'd just like to say that, on behalf of the council, we'd like to thank the legislature for continuing to look for ways in which to fund hosting the festival. Because of your efforts, we now have, like you said earlier, about $2.7 million in the GVB trust account. I'd also like to add that in the operations account for the festival that is being held by CAHA, we probably have about $178,000 in that account.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And as you know, for us personally, the last Festival of the Arts was in Solomon Islands, and they had a presentation that was hard to beat. And Guam said that they were ready to take the next hosting, and because it was awarded our way, we have a big task ahead of us with a very, very little time. So I'm just hoping, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker, that our colleagues will see this as an opportune time to work closely with the lead agency, which is CAHA, and through Department of Chamorro Affairs, to work on making sure that we have the necessary resources needed. And it is not the intent of the legislature to take away from what was truly created through the late Senator Bel Ariola to make sure that there is a provision. We were just saddened at the fact that one of our main artists left us and is now on a new journey out of the earth, this earth, but it is talent like his that needs to be remembered, but more importantly so with the generation of talent that we have here and wanting to showcase it to the rest of the world that the resources are critically needed. And that was a commitment that we made to the Pacific region. And that was a commitment that you guys shared a part with, right?
Yes.
And if you can add to that.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that yes, we did make a commitment to the entire Pacific that, we want to welcome the 2,700 delegates to Guam, and we want to treat them as our family members, our brothers and sisters in the Pacific. But further to the funding and the corporate sponsorship, the legislative appropriation and the corporate sponsorship and fundraising events that will occur between now and May 22nd, CAHA has taken a very serious look at applying for grants. We did apply for a grant from the Department of Interior, and we are requesting the governor's office to follow up on that request. We are aware the Department of Interior gave American Samoa $350,000 when they hosted the festival back in 2008. And so we went ahead and submitted through their technical grants an application also. We're looking at also partnering with the Guam Trades Academy in doing some kind of training grant through the National Endowment of the Arts to assist in the construction and training of our people to build the traditional huts that we're going to have to construct for the traditional village. And then we're also looking at other grant opportunities that will be far longer term, that will have long-term impacts. One such concept is NEPA. We always talk about NEPA hut. The roofs on the Chamorro huts are with the NEPA leaves, and we know that we have a shortage of NEPA. And so one concept was perhaps to apply for a grant where we can go ahead and plant NEPA, and then teach our young how to harvest the NEPA, how to plant it, how to harvest it, how to make it ready so that we can weave. Today, most of our weaving is with coconut leaves, but when you really do the research, our original weavers were using the NEPA leaves, and so we're trying to be as creative as we can in looking for grant opportunities that will assist us as we host the festival, but also have longer term impacts on our community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senators. I'd like to also announce that Therese Ariola, chairperson of 2016 FESPAC Planning Committee, also submitted testimony in favor of Bill 19-33. Senator Ada, do you have any questions or comments? Senator Spaldon?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate what needs to be done in a big way, and I won't go through the history of it and fluff any feathers. I guess the question is, I'm not really quite certain. I think I know what you're saying, but I'm not sure. And there is kind of conflict, I guess an internal conflict with you in terms of what to do. You support the measure, and yet in a letter you say that the amendment is not necessary. And I'm just trying to figure out how do you, in this letter that I just saw today, right? And the very first point is that one of the valid reasons recognizing the intent of the legislature says the amendment is not necessary as CAHA manages the official FESPAC account and is responsible for programming, which is a big expense to the project. I'm not really sure what that means. I mean, you're saying you support this measure, and this measure really is an amendment to existing law, and yet in this letter it says the amendment's not necessary. Can you just clarify that?
Yes, of course, Senator. If you would notice, the working session was basically just discussing this. But if you notice on the very last sentence that we thought that this particular amendment and authorization would allay us our fears of the future of taking money away from the percent for the art. Just, it cannot be, like NGOs come in and then they rob our account. It has a sunset provision, and for that reason, we were very strongly in favor that if we follow the grant application process and that we put in black and white legally that the FESPAC activity, which is directed to artisans who are participatory of this whole Olympic of culture that will be showcased here in Guam, that we felt comfortable with the sunset clause. The sunset clause. We did feel comfortable with that, Senator.
Okay. And again,
Senator, if I might add also, before I go on, I want to thank you because Senator Espaldo, you were the initial sponsor of the bill that created the FESPAC Coordinating Committee, and it's nice to see you back again. Thank you very much for starting us on this path.
Thank you.
So you're right, because as a council we are conflicted because we support funding the festival, but then at the same time we know that we need to protect our artists, and this program, after being in limbo for 20 years, is now at the point where artists are getting excited about it. We have artists that are looking at ways to earn some money for their work. And it's through the Percent of the Arts program that they can do that. We had some artists at the GPA building that, earned upwards of $9,000. And that is, that's something for artists here in Guam where you never are able to make that kind of money. And so because of that, there's, they're excited, there's motivation to continue to create. And, they see a light at the end of the tunnel. They're not just going to be starving artists. As we all know, artists are always starving. But, they're motivated. And we want to, as a council, continue to protect that. And so what we're asking is that, just allow us the opportunity through the revision of the rules and regulations. And so I think this would be a good thing for all of us, for the festival, for our artists.
Okay. And I have no problem. Again, I'm very supportive of the efforts. I'm just trying to understand how this all comes together. Now, I know that previously or earlier you said that, or at least the report states that there's $13 million is really the budget that's being looked at to be able to throw a successful festival. And right now you have about $2.7 million in the account. Is that including corporate sponsorships at this point, or is that a separate account?
We estimated that that it'll cost about $13 million. Of that $13 million, $2 million needs to be raised in corporate sponsorship. We're at probably about $700,000, so we're almost halfway there in the corporate sponsorship. We figured $5 million in government appropriation, and then the remaining $6 million would be in kind.
Okay.
Yeah, and so.
Okay.
As far as cash.
And so in terms of cash, we're really looking at about $7 million
yes, and
altogether.
2 being raised privately.
And the 2 of that being raised privately. So really what you're looking for is that difference between the 2.6 and the 5. So you're talking about another 2.5, roughly.
3
million to cover it all. Okay. Now, can I just ask this, and I don't know if you're keeping track of it, in terms of the number of buildings that are going to be renovated or constructed or whatnot from now until June of next year, do you have an idea of what the total construction cost would be or the build-out cost would be? I mean, just so we can kind of calculate what you could expect in terms of the 1% that would then be placed into CAHA? Because that would then give us an idea of how much more in terms of appropriations or any other methods or channels that we might have to provide assistance to you for. Any idea?
I have been meeting with the government entities that have capital improvement projects actually being scheduled. We looked at DOE because they're putting like $100 million in renovations for their schools. We looked at the opportunity that will be laid to us with the capital improvement projects at the airport. We've started discussions with Cura on their public spaces. We further discussed also the fact that we now have a QC that has been signed for the Guam Regional Medical City, the center. We're looking at Guam Community College, who's also doing some capital outlay. And yeah, pretty much.
Okay, no, and I appreciate that. And again, I'm sure we don't have a real total figure, but it seems encouraging that there is a possibility. I guess the question that I need to then ask is, by law, or by the existing law at this point, if there is construction, that 1% for the arts really could either go one of two ways. It could go directly to the artist, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I just want to make sure I understand this. Or if they don't adorn their buildings with local artwork, then that 1% goes to CAHA. Is that correct? How that works?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And it going directly to the artists is working with the council on doing a public call out and working with the architect and developer to ensure that all the walls and all the spaces are meet the requirement. And then the second option is for the funding to go into a grant fund where people can come and apply for grants.
For grants for their artwork or
yes.
to do art.
To do art, yes.
To do art.
Yes.
Okay, and again, I'm just trying to figure in my mind, in this case, and I know you're concerned for the artists, right, is that if all that development and construction is going to happen, including the GCC campus and all the projects that you named, I would imagine, let's call it a 50-50 split, 50% of that 1% of all those projects will probably go directly to the artists that they're going to be working with,
yeah.
And some may opt not to go with the artist, and then that goes into the fund, right? Do you feel that you would, from all those projects, because say for example DOE, if there is that $100 million build out for the schools, that means $1 million will be set aside for the arts, for the most part. That potentially all could be put into CAHA, or it could potentially all be bought in art, or a percentage both ways, right? Would you be able to, do you feel comfortable that you'd be able to meet that $3 million extra that you need to finish off the government side of the funding?
Not from strictly the percent of the arts program.
Okay.
Because the funding, we believe, will not be available before, $3 million will not be available before June 2016. For example, the Guam Community College, there's probably about $400,000 in the percent of the arts. And we talked to them in 2013, and it's not going to happen till probably the end of this year. The airport, with their $700 million expansion, they're just in the design phase, and I think it's like at 30%, so that's not going to happen before the festival. So we don't believe, just the reality of it, there might be a little bit that might be available before 2016, but I don't think the percent funding will meet the $3 million.
Okay, and again, because I'm looking at the law, and and I understand the intent, and it's good, it's all good, but it's not really clear, right? If there is, say for example, a contract that's been already bid out for these projects, even though they don't start this year, when, I guess the question in my mind is, when do those funds get transferred into CAHA? Is it upon completion?
The funds, normally, in our experience in the last 2 years, it is the developer that will issue the checks to the artists.
Okay,
We help administer the program.
okay,
Yeah. If they desire not to avail themselves of art, then it'll come to us, and it'll have to be before they receive the occupancy permit. Because the key thing is DPW cannot issue them an occupancy permit without Joseph's signature.
wow, Joe.
So yeah.
Okay, no, and I'm just trying to understand, I guess in my mind, one of the scenarios would be, is there, if the funding, if the project is approved already,
Yes.
and it's on drawing boards and the groundbreaking is all going on, but they don't get their occupancy permit until 2 years down the road, or maybe a
Right.
year after
Right.
the FestPac, are those funds then, can it be remunerated back to any appropriations that may be given to you? And I know you wouldn't want that to, because you'd want that to but I mean, and I understand the sunset provision,
Right.
But again, when does collection actually take place? I mean, the actual transfer, I understand, is at the end, I
Right.
would imagine. But
Could it be done
is
before?
yeah.
Yeah.
Is it really technically happened before, because you already have committed to, say, for example, a $100 million project, and technically the transfer happens right there and then, or the commitment to transfer is already happening right then and then?
One of the things, Senator, that is a process, and it's driven from soft costs to construction costs.
Right.
So if you have $100 million sitting in the bank for the restoration, the rebuilding of our schools, the soft costs will be your architectural and engineering design, for which the percent of the art is not part of the soft cost. It's actually the hard cost, the actual building construction. So let's say out of the 100 million, by the time the soft costs were extracted and the lowest bidder comes in for that particular project, that particular number is actualized upon the award of the lowest bidder. And then we start calculating from there the percent.
Right, okay.
Senator, I like where you're going with that, but I think what we need to do is we need to look at each project by project, because, for example, GCC, that $400,000 actually represents 4 different projects. And instead of piecemealing 4 small projects, in a conversation with President Okada, we said, why don't we mix it, and then we'll have a larger amount. Her funding is from grants.
Right.
So it's not like she can transfer it until, I mean, it's all dependent on the funding source, but that's a good thing to have in discussions with them early in the percent discussions with the agencies.
Okay. And I appreciate, again, this is just
Yeah,
for
yeah.
my own edification, so that when it comes down to
But I like your idea.
any discussion on the floor, then it's like, well, okay, here we are, right? And I'd like to just be able to address it if it does come up. I appreciate it. Madam Speaker, I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Oh, I'm sorry, I turned myself off. When Okudu High School was completed and they were given an occupancy permit, they had presented a check to FestPac, but they also had presented a check to the school for their art programs, and they also presented a check for Regalo. My question then, because I didn't get the details, is that 1% then, does that 1% encompass then those 3 separate checks?
Yes.
So you didn't realize then the whole 1%?
Yes.
Because they have given it for the art program.
Right.
Their art program in the schools, but not necessarily
Say,
to CAHA.
Right.
But then Regalo, which is not an art program at all?
The Regalo funding went directly to a performing arts event. Yeah.
Okay, so that's how then they were
That's-
able
yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
Now, in your rules and regulations, are you then very specific in terms to be able to tell these contractors, these developers, then really how the money should be, be used for and or deposited into CAHA?
And we made, I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, we made a packet, and Jackie, maybe what we'll do is we'll forward that full packet to all the centers who are present here that enumerates all those things that you just talked about. And it didn't matter who we went to. If we felt that they were going to be participatory by law with the percent of the art, we have a packet that enumerates all those issues or
Okay.
statements.
So the committee would appreciate getting a copy so we can provide them to the members. How much have you received so far since the implementation of this law?
Okay, the way the program works is, for example, the Guam Museum, the percent amount for the Guam Museum is about 280,000. CAHA did not receive any of that money. That went directly to the artists. The same thing with the CCU building. That was a $300,000 program. I'm sorry, 280. That went directly to the artists with the really small administrative fee to CAHA, because CAHA staff does do all of the legwork, contacting the artists, doing the call out and all of that stuff. So there's no real money that comes to CAHA because it just goes right back out to the artists. So CCU has a contract with each of the artists, or GPA had a contract with each of the artists, and then they issue a check directly to the artists. Same thing as the Guam Museum. The Guam Museum has a contract with each of the artists, and then they issue a check to the artists. So it's not like GPA will give the money to CAHA and then we'll run the program. We work side by side with the agency to execute the program.
So you've not realized any then yet?
No.
So far it's just been, like you say, to the artist directly.
Right.
Now the money though that you got from
From Okudu, and I would really like to acknowledge and thank Mr. Carlos Camacho, who is a member of that foundation, because he came forward, and this was at the beginning when of implementing the percent of the arts program. He came forward and he told us that he was doing this project at Okudu and that the 1% represents 130,000, but they were at the completion of that project. So in discussions with him and also with former Senator Aline Yamashita, that's how it was agreed upon that perhaps funding can go back to Okudu for their art program. And then I think he also indicated $54,000 to go to FESPAC, and then the Regalo funding.
Now, since they've done that, and that's why I'm asking this question, because although there are two separate $100 million projects that's going to be ongoing for DOE, the very first, of course, the ribbon cutting or the groundbreaking for the gym, that's going to cost $14 million in 25 years, but it's only about $500,000 a year of debt, service. So I don't know which amount then you would be, receiving as a result of that. Is it 25 years down the line, or or until completion, like you say, until they have turned, the key to them? So they plan to turn the key over in September 30th, 2015. So will you then be getting the 1% of that full project amount of $14 million, or 500?
It would be the developer or the contractor. So we would work with the contractor, because the contractor is the one that goes and gets the building permits, and the contractor, right, gets the occupancy permit. So that's real key, is the occupancy permit.
And then, of course, that whole project at Tejan is the $100 million project. But then there's another $100 million project for Simon Sanchez and all the other schools that are not under a lease. But that's not even, by the time I think they kick that off, would not be until 2016. So then again, so you would not be realizing, all of these monies that, you could be receiving, as you said earlier, and even with UOG with their engineering building and the student center, you won't see that at all. I am wondering then, is that because of the lateness of receiving these monies, whether in the amendment, in amending, the bill itself, whether language can be incorporated to have FESPAC be able to realize this on the front end versus the back end, because these are projects that are going to be for 25 years, 30 years. When will you realize some of these monies? And it can't be at the far end. We like to see it on the front end.
I thank you, Madam Speaker. I follow you. I follow you all the way. And as I said earlier, I think the key component here is upon the awarding of the lowest bidder. And then when let's say that they say they're going to spend out of the $100 million project, X amount of dollars to the soft costs of the architectural and engineering design plans and other things aside from the actual brick and mortar. The brick and mortar at the lowest cost to the public will be that amount that would be sanctioned into the 1%. So you're right. Realizing that particular sanctioned number won't evolve itself until upon which time an award is actually awarded and that we know exactly what amount of dollars was placed to brick and mortar.
Madam, if I may just follow up on that one then.
Sure.
But earlier you said that normally it doesn't transpire until an occupancy permit, right? So we'd have to figure something else if we go down that road. But if I just may, one more question,
Sure.
Madam Speaker. Hearing what I just heard, or at least, for the past few minutes, I mean, I'm not objecting, and I will support this. I'll support my chairman on this one. But in reality, this is almost one of those, I hope something comes in, because there's no guarantee that anything will come into CAHA for FESPAC, because if the developers do decide to go with local artists and buy the artwork or have them do something in their building, then technically CAHA receives nothing for FESPAC with this provision. So we're just hoping that any monies that do come in then gets translated to FESPAC. And I really have no problem, but I just want to make sure that's my perception of what would happen. Am I on the right track? Okay, so it's not a guarantee that you're going to get 1% of anything. Right. It all depends on the developer himself and the project itself and how much they incorporate local art into it. And then anything else is really the overrun of what you get.
Yes.
Right?
And that's the reason why I didn't want it to be a false hope, for,
Right.
for the FESPAC.
Madam Speaker, if I may. I guess based on the intent, it would mean that the awarding of the 1% for the arts at this time, and instead of it being dual, that 1% would go through, based on the recommendation, would go through FESPAC, and then through the grant application because of the amendment, because of the recommendation, then the grant application for the utilization of that money from the 1% will come from the application process. That's based on the recommendation here, because the way it's written, because CAHA wants to protect the program, they had concerns about why is the bill necessary. My take is because that option is afforded that way with the 1%. If this bill passes through this body, then the 1% will go directly to CAHA. and not be given that option. At the recommendation of the amendments that would be made in the revision of this bill. That's based on discussions that we had when this bill was introduced. We've been talking through the Finance Committee, and the author of the latest bill with the 1% Arts, Senator Aileen Yamashita, also agreed in working this perspective out because we knew that we needed to find the additional funding. So it was like, okay, but we'll put a sunset provision to give this program, and that the funding that we received from the building of the facilities, that 1% will go toward that FESPAC instead of going through them facilitating through the artisans outright.
Monica,
okay. Go ahead,
can I
Madam
ask,
Speaker.
I know that with the FESPAC committee, you work very closely with the artisans, and they have been working with your committee, of course, in submitting their budget requests, to be able to carry out what they need for FESPAC. Have any one of them basically given you any feedback in terms of how this may impact on them individually versus maybe seeing the greater benefit in terms of, their art, you see, the art itself rather than the individual, and it being short-term, meaning just up until next year? So have you gotten any feedback from any of them?
In our meetings, there was a great deliberation from each discipline of culture as to what they would actualize and what it would cost them to actually do what they need to do within 2 weeks. They're very cognizant of the fact that they need money and that they can't proceed forward without that money. And that directly impacts their discipline, directly themselves. So that being said, I would like to also comment that I don't want to have any missed opportunities between now and June 1st. I'm not looking at 3 million. Any amount is better than zero. And I really implore of the 15 centers to really look at that any amount that adds up to lower our cost is better than zero. And I really believe that there are projects that may evolve that are smaller projects that will evolve and allow us to capture some money versus just looking at the 100 to 400 million like that. But any amount that would help us mitigate any cost is always a direct impact to the disciplines.
Madam Speaker, for me? And I appreciate that, and I understand that. I think we all really want to help you succeed. I guess again, now that you've kind of identified at the very front end almost the tension between your responsibilities to the artists and your responsibilities to FESPAC, there is a tension. And again, let's not deny it, because it is. The long-term mission is to help the artists and to put something in their pockets, help them create the art, help them do what they do. And I guess I understand. So my understanding, at least now, is that from now or until when this bill gets enacted into law until June 1st, all monies that were geared for that 1% goes directly to CAHA for FESPAC. Is that kind of like the amendment that will be made eventually, or that you would like to see on that? And I guess let me just follow up that question with the perspective that in preparation for FESPAC, knowing full well, and this is one of the visions I saw back when we introduced the invitation to host it, was that there would definitely be great exposure to tourism, and that would be one of the showcases to come in. Now's the time, let's see it all right here on the island of Guam. That gives a good opportunity for our local artists to display their wares. However, right, if their ability to create their art is dependent upon grants that possibly could come from CAHA, and all that money is going to be tied up in FESPAC, what opportunities do they have to be able to get the materials and do what they need to do to create their art so they can sell it at the festival. And again, that's not a question directed to you. It's a question in my mind. It's like,
Yes.
Houston, we got a problem. You know, again, I can see the tensions between the interests that you both have to protect. And I'm not sure where to go with that. That's just a statement. And it's a question, like I said, that's rolling in my mind.
I want to thank you for acknowledging how, the perception of that tension, because it really was a tough thing, because we have the short-term festival, there'll be economic benefits, there's pride in culture, pride in our island, pride in our people, showcasing Guam, all of that. And then there's the long-term Percent of the Arts program that will help develop and provide motivation and incentive to our artists and our young artists too. We have a lot of young people now that are creating art. We have a lot of young cultural producers, and they're all it's the cultural pride, and they're all, Speaker, a lot of the young artists now that are just, they're feeling that pride, and they're using that cultural pride and their creative juices to create works of art, that are culturally sensitive. So, we have that short-term festival, and yes, there'll be economic benefits, and then we have the long-term Percent of the Arts, which will motivate our artists to continue to create works of art. And so some kind of blend where we can do both would be, we have to find that balance.
And I believe, if you don't mind, Senator, just to inject, the percent of the art funds to be made available to FastBack up till June 1st will be subject to the Council's review and approval. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the full amount, but a negotiated amount that would impact still the percent of the art moving forward. But clearly, we also know the need of FastBack.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'd like to, I really appreciate, of course, all this discussion, and I think that the dialogue needs to continue, but I think we need to also try to bring in maybe these contractors right now, currently that we know, and maybe even have the conversation with them about how they feel, whether portions of that amount based on the front end of whatever their projects are, maybe not the whole thing, especially like this one that we did yesterday. It's a 25-year project. Debt obligation to the government, and of about $500,000 a year, an annual appropriation. So then, do we talk about that, or do we talk about the 500 every year, or the 14 million? And that maybe there can be some discussion with them because of where we're at right now with FastBack, whether modification maybe with a time certain, a date also to expire for these particular projects.
And I liken that to the whole issue of bond covenants as it relates to what their legal authorities are as to upfront versus etc. And that would be tied into a discussion of whether or not there are any restrictions to actualizing upfront versus in segmented payments out. And that would be a strong discussion between the covenant of whatever funding that's coming in.
When is the date in which you would complete the revised rules and regulations, so that then, regarding this percent of the arts, whether should we then wait until you complete that and provide it here? I don't want, what I'm trying to say is I don't want this to drive what your rules and regs are going to be. You've got to drive it in the best interest, of course, of the artist, because this is going to be a one-time event, whereas what the artists are going to provide will be a lifetime, of work. And so therefore, can you give us a date in terms of what you're looking at And then that way we can work closely with you also on the amendment of this and other discussion with other stakeholders.
Thank you for that, Speaker. The whole process of the percent of the arts is a standing agenda item on the during the council's board meetings, and we've been talking about revising this beginning January, and so we're looking, I mean, just the whole number of days, and I think we're looking at March, correct, Jackie? March, April for that whole AAA process to be completed.
Okay. Is there anyone last questions? Well, I want to thank you very much, Mr. Cameron and Ms. Guzman, for coming forward and providing testimony. We've definitely, are exploring now a lot of different options to really make this work. We surely don't want, to have this conflict between, one group versus the other, but really as something where we'll be able to meet everybody's of course, needs, for not just, for 2016, but surely for, their lifetime as artists. So I want to thank you. It is now exactly 1 hour later that, we've had and met the requirements of the law of Bill 19-33. Of course, the committee will continue to keep it open to get more testimonies. And the committee will work very closely with both of you and the other stakeholders to discuss some of the other options that was brought up in today's public hearing. So today then at 2:38, this public hearing then is adjourned. Thank you.